This week on Cool Story with Brie and Bridie, my super exciting news, 2 really good books we've read, the news in book world that Spotify is entering the audiobook game, and Nobel Prize winners, one coup, one not okay, not coup. You are listening to Cool Story with Brie and Bridie, where we talk about our stories, the best stories, and the biggest story of the week. I'm Brie Lee.
And I'm Bridie Jabor. So what have you been up to this week, Brie?
I want to talk about myself.
I want to hear about yourself.
Yes. Okay, I have something so exciting to share with you. You don't even know what it is. This is all about me. But I'm very excited, and I want to share it with you. Maybe 5 people in the world know this, and it's top secret.
It's top secret, except
it's top secret for like a little bit. I got my book cover.
Oh my God!
And I fucking love it. Which, like, as you know, is like, it's such a fraught time and such a fraught moment when you get shown what your book cover, like what they suggest.
Did you get options?
Yes, I did.
It's funny you're bringing this up because I was just going through old photos last night, saw a couple of my ugly book cover options for my first book and shuddered when I saw them. So I know the feeling of seeing them and then giving delicate feedback.
So this is it. Don't show the camera.
Don't show the camera?
Yeah. You can't like share it. You can't like share it yet. I just want to show you.
Okay. When are we going to be able to share it?
I don't know. Maybe in like a couple of weeks.
Brie, that is so cool.
Isn't it the fucking sickest thing you've ever seen?
That is a genuinely brilliant cover.
I am shook. I am so stoked.
I'm trying to think of what it reminds me of, the kind of book. Do you know what it is?
What?
And I love these covers.
Yeah.
It's Franzen S.
Yeah, it's Franzen. It's Jonathan fucking
okay,
Franzen.
I'm glad that you're not taking that badly because he's a man and we know how you feel about men.
No. The thing that it's not like specifically, I know. It's not specifically Jonathan Franzen. What it is big book.
Yeah, it's big, serious literary book.
Yep.
This is a big deal.
This is a
great book
deal.
and a big deal.
A big deal. I'm very, very flattered by how gigantic they made my name, for example.
It's as big as the title, which is a huge compliment.
Exactly. It's so declaratory. It's like, motherfucker, I am here. This is my new book.
That is so exciting. And after 5 years of work, getting these genuinely thrilling moments.
I'm like it's made it very, very real. Very real now.
When are you going to show it?
I don't know. I've got this week I have a meeting with the, marketing and sales department nice and early to find out kind of what the plan is.
Well, we're going to have to put it first on the Cool Story Instagram since you've teased all the listeners with it now.
Yeah,
so you guys will be the first to see it at Cool Story Brie Bridie.
Yeah, you can have like a 2-hour exclusive before Alan and Unwin send it out wherever they do.
2-hour exclusive is great.
Yeah, yeah. What have you been up to?
Well, nothing that thrilling. I had one of those conversations this week with my kid that if you tweeted it, you would get a big that didn't happen. But it was one of the very funny conversations where we went on a long road trip. So we were just all in the, chatting in the car, talking, boredom, great for good conversations, as we all know. And Hamish, who's 5.5, says to me, Mum, what makes a human being? And I was like, wow, that's a good question. And I said, well, and you can't use words like philosophical because I wanted to say that's quite a philosophical question. And I said,
Hamish, that's so existential of you.
Yeah. Are you not the himbo I thought you were? And I said, well, some people think different things and some people think it's to do with consciousness and being able to feel for other people and put yourself in their shoes. And some people think it's about your soul. Brie Lee definitely doesn't think it's about your soul. Look at her. You should see her face. Right? I knew exactly what you think about that. And I said, but basically we're a type of mammal. So you know that there's tigers and elephants and human beings are just a type of mammal in that category is a simple answer, I guess. because I try to answer some of these questions without Googling because it's good. It's like a good thought experiment at times. And he said, can a bad person still be a human being? I was like, whoa.
Fucking hell, Hamish.
Yeah, and I said, yeah, of course, buddy. I said, bad people are absolutely human beings. But also there are not actually a lot of bad people. Just because someone does a bad thing, it doesn't make them a bad person. And there are some genuinely, truly awful people out there, but they're a very, very small amount of people. And usually if you think someone's bad, you have to try to be able to give them grace and think about what's maybe has happened in their life to make them behave this way, and not think that just because they're a bad person or have done a bad thing that they're not human as well. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, so Vampirina is not a bat person. She's a human being. Vampirina is a little cartoon vampire on the Disney Channel. And he'd actually been asking me, are bat people human beings? So I thought that I was like really stepping up to the plate and having this very deep conversation about empathy.
He is a himbo after all.
He just wanted to know if vampires are human beings.
Oh my God. That is so funny.
I know, it was very funny.
Are they?
No, vampires aren't human beings. They're dead.
What, a human being's no longer a human after they pass away?
Not when you become a zombie or a ghost.
Is this a soul thing?
Yes.
Oh.
I've thought about all of this. I'm not one of those parents who say vampires aren't real. Because I'm like, anything can be real.
Depends. When's your Mercury descending?
Exactly. The intellectual project of my parenting definitely leans more kooky.
That is so funny.
I know, it was really funny. But also, we were coming back from a beach holiday, which means that actually it should mean that I got to read a lot, and I didn't read as much as I took 3 books away with me and I read 1 book.
This is interesting to me though, because sometimes I find that the books that I take with me on holiday are like a little bit more aspirational than what I actually want to read when I'm then by the beach. Did your selection tell you anything?
No, I think that I'm good at picking what mood I'm going to be in, and not taking away something too heavy. Like I take away page turners or books that I've been like dying to read. I save them a bit. So it wasn't about the selection. It was just about time. And, I was with my brother, my sisters, my niece, my kids, my husband, my mum and my dad. barely had time to go to the toilet.
Yeah, right.
Let alone read my books. So I just got through 1.
Well, and all right, let's talk about yours first.
It was The Fraud by Zadie Smith. Look at that. Her author name on this book, her name on this book is as big as the title as well.
Actually, it's
slightly bigger.
Yeah, I feel like
the Smith is as big as Fraud. Anyway,
yes. Yeah, I think that's how you're just such a fucking bigger and bigger and biggest dick player. How much of the cover is taken up by your name.
Your cover's better than this cover. Not a bad cover, but your cover's better than this cover.
Oh my God.
So yes, I finally read it, and I did really enjoy it. It wasn't one of my favorites of hers. At a sentence level, she's just so brilliant.
She's brilliant.
So how she has those like insights into human beings and whether they're bad. She would have a great insight into whether Vampirina is a human being. But just that insight into human psyche and the way that people are and how we relate to each other. So at its sentence level, I dog-eared so many pages just because I love certain sentences. I didn't love how some of it was written. A lot of it was reading people having conversations, but it doesn't explain exactly what they're talking about, but you're meant to infer it. And I don't always love that type of writing, especially in a historical novel. But maybe I'm just a bit dumb.
You're not dumb.
No, I'm not dumb. But maybe I was in a dumb mood because I was at the beach. And
that's true. Sometimes I'm not my sharpest
self.
And
so there was some of it where I'm like, I wish you just would explain to me what you guys are talking about instead of me having to figure it out. But the middle of the book I loved.
Okay, I'm a third of the way through, so I think I haven't hit
Yeah,
whatever you're about to
the
talk about.
middle of the book I loved, and it's all about life on Jamaica in the 1800s, particularly for the slaves there, but done in – it's just like that part is Zadie Smith at her best, where it's just all like human stories and interest in people's life and not just about everything that's grim about their lives, but also about like, you know, their ordinary joys and human relations. And I also learned so much that I didn't know, which I love doing in a historical novel. So that was my favorite part. But yeah, I feel like the chapters were too short. Like I wish that she'd made proper big chapters. Like it's written with chapters like 1 or 2 pages. I definitely still recommend it, but I wasn't as gripped by it as I thought that I was going to be. What are you thinking a third of the way through?
I am finding it really funny. And I can't believe more people don't talk about how hilarious it is. I think it's hilarious.
It's very dry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's just my like chef's kiss humor. Just, yeah, I'm loving how funny it is.
Do you know what's going on all of the time?
So far, yeah.
Maybe I am just dumb.
You're not dumb. You are not dumb. But the other thing too, I sent you that link. I've been dying to talk to you about. So you and I, Bridie, we both do this thing where we're thrilled every time a new Zadie Smith comes out that she does all of the rounds of interviews on all the podcasts. And now I'm pretty sure you and I have both listened to all of the latest ones that she's done. And the most recent.
And we both sent each other ones the other had missed. Because when you're just searching their name, because it comes up with a lot of old episodes, sometimes you can miss.
Yep.
And anyway, I think we've both sent each other ones that the other hadn't yet listened to.
And the latest one that just came out is Zadie Smith on the podcast Talk Easy. And I was just thinking about you so much when I was listening to it. It's so good. And in particular, for anyone who listened to our previous episode where we talked about Andrea Longchu's bad review of Zadie Smith, one of the things that I can't remember what your position was, but one of the things...
You can't remember what my position was? I'm completely vindicated by this interview.
Yeah.
I'm like punching the air listening to it, being like, Bridie was right. No, you weren't wrong at all. I think we were both right. But I was like, yes, this is what I said.
I think we both agreed. So one of the things we both took issue with was the way Andrea Longchu had mined, in an extraordinary way, so much of Zadie Smith's like essays and interviews she'd given and lectures she'd given from years and years and years before, and sort of placed them all along the same, as though they'd all just taken place, and that we could safely presume that Zadie Smith still held every single one of those opinions and that they were all to be taken as seriously as each other.
Yeah, I think I went a bit further than you on that as well, and felt that she had actually misrepresented some of those essays as well.
That's true. Yeah, I remember that. And in this Talk Easy interview, the host has done this extraordinary deep dive and goes through and reads out these things to Zadie Smith that she can't even remember writing some of them. And on many of them, her opinions have really changed, and she's grown and developed in her perspectives since then. And it was just the most satisfying, like rigorous conversation I have heard in a very long time.
Have you ever listened to Talk Easy before?
No, that was my first Talk Easy.
I was so excited when you sent it to me and said she's done Talk Easy, because he is a truly extraordinary interviewer. And I've listened to quite a few of his interviews, and often think when someone's doing the rounds, like the celebrity chef Alison Roman had a new cookbook out a few months ago, and she does all these rounds. And he just usually does by far the best interview. He's so curious, and the time that he takes in research, his name's Sam.
Oh, thank you. I was just looking up.
Yeah.
What's his surname?
And the time he takes in his research is extraordinary, and what he finds. But also, I really appreciate about him how he responds to their answers.
Sam Fragoso,
yeah. How he responds to their answers, like he's not just doing his list of questions and reading out each quote. He actually listens to what they say and responds back to it. And he's only 29. He's so young.
Well, Zadie Smith says he's like, there's this like tension between Sam Fragoso and Zadie Smith in the interview about how young he is. It's pretty funny.
I thought that she was more like teasing him a bit, and he was teasing her, like, because he is a funny guy as well. But I loved that interview so much, and and also I loved her agreeing with herself from 23 years ago as well.
Yep.
Like, because there were points where she's like, I said that. She's like, yep, I still agree with that. And really goes back to how she was treated. I really found it interesting how she was treated by the press.
Yes.
And how she felt treated in London when White Teeth first came out when she was 24.
Yep. There's been a lot of conversation about that this time around. I think there's some sort of like, I mean, there's been a safe distance since White Teeth for a while, but in particular, one of the lines she said that really struck me was how she struggled being the center of the focus of other people's envy.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa, shooketh. Like, that was when she spoke about she would be mid-interview being interviewed by a journalist, and they would be asking her what I considered to be sort of deranged, borderline inappropriate questions about kind of her life. And Zadie Smith would realize partway through the interview, oh, like, your dream is to be where I am. Like, you are asking me these weird questions because you wish that you were like this successful novelist.
Yeah, and it's not that their dream was to write. It sounded also like the envy that was happening wasn't that their dream was to write a really great book or to write a book at all, but their dream was to be famous.
Yeah.
That's what they were envious of. They weren't actually envious of her work.
Yeah.
They were envious of all the attention that she was getting from it.
Package.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, we'll link to it in the show notes, but also that Talk Easy, so worth just going through. His interview subjects are so interesting. He did Michelle Williams.
Oh, the actress.
Yeah. And she spoke in it about Heath Ledger.
Ooh.
And also and she had really interesting stuff to say also about her teen years and Dawson's Creek. And I think
never watched Dawson's Creek. I don't know a fucking thing about it.
Oh my God. When I was 11, my cousin was visiting from England, and she was like 19 and, you know, doing like her year abroad, like her gap year. And she was in Canberra and I was in Grafton, and I used to ring her every Friday night. I still remember this and have so much affection for her, Elaine. I used to ring her every Friday night and recount to her what had happened at Dawson's Creek that week, essentially minute by minute. And she would listen. And it was like Friday night and she was 19. She's like, wow, Bridie.
Friday night for a 19-year-old.
Did Pacey really? Oh, that was like my conversation to have. And it wasn't that she was a big Dawson's Creek fan, so that's who I picked. It was just like, this is the only grown-up listening to me talk about this extremely important thing, which is whether Joey's going to pick Pacey or Dawson. What? Anyway, even without being a big Dawson's Creek fan, I think you'd find the Michelle Williams interview really interesting. His interview with Alison Roman was brilliant as well, and he really took her to task at times. He's really good at forcing someone to reckon with themselves, but not in a gotcha way at all, just in a genuinely intellectually curious way.
The thing I think one of the reasons I think he gets away with that is because it is so obvious how much effort he has put in.
Exactly.
And that is such a sign of respect.
And then he's taking them seriously.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I take author interviews very seriously, and I know that people are grateful when I do author interviews, and it's just purely because there's no shortcut for like around the homework.
Exactly.
Like, you just do your fucking homework.
And sometimes I'm watching some interviews and I wonder if I just notice this because I've done so many myself and I know what it's like to be the interviewer, to be the interviewee, and you know, I've been doing live events on stage for quite a few years now. And it's just so obvious when someone is, in inverted commas, winging it.
I know.
And I often look at the audience and wonder, can they see this? Are they noticing that this person interviewing hasn't put in the effort that they should have?
And I find it so pathetic and disrespectful, and I'm extremely judgmental about someone who agrees to interview an author and then doesn't do the homework.
Well, guess who's interviewing you on stage next year? I don't even know if you know this yet. I won't name the event, but I got approached this week to interview you on stage next year for your novel. So you can give me my review in the week after I do it.
Well, I finished a really, really good book. I'm only going to mention it briefly. Charlotte Wood's new novel, Stoneyard Devotional, is so good. Something I want to say about it is that It's not a novel that has a plot that is particularly either like easy to summarize it's not a novel that's plot driven. This woman has sort of somehow exited. It's set in the present day, but it's set in this random remote regional pseudo nunnery. And
Nunnery.
yeah.
Convent,
what?
babe.
Oh, what? I don't fucking, whatever. Well, pseudo.
Get in touch with your soul.
Let you know when I find it. Anyway, there are these nuns living together out in this like country, outside of a country town. And our protagonist has sort of just kind of quit her life. We don't have a great sense of why, but we know that she's sort of in mourning, and also that she did this job as some kind of really in one of those do-good environmental agencies where people wake up and spend their whole days trying to like undo the damage that the rest of us, and in particular big corporations, do to the planet in particular. And that she just she had a husband and she just sort of quit her whole life and started living with these nuns. And it's like, that's kind of it, but I could not put it down. There is a way that Charlotte Wood writes, and I remember this being the exact feeling I had after I finished The Weekend, where this is quite specific. You know when you've been swimming in the ocean for a while and then you have like the taste of fresh water in your mouth and it's like really noticeable and clean and clear?
Yes.
That's how Charlotte Wood's writing makes me feel, that I've been like in the salt water for ages and Charlotte Wood is just this tall glass of water. Everything she writes is real. I never have a moment where I'm taken out of the action because something's a bit clever or like just some kind of witticism. Every single person I meet in one of her books is a whole human being that I would not at all be surprised if they just walked in the room right now. And no A, B, C, D, like climax conclusion needs to happen because she is just so masterful at understanding the human condition and putting it into the exact most natural words that it's like it's not even a book, it's just real life recorded somehow.
That's exactly how I felt about The Weekend
Yes!
as well. It was so vivid to me.
So
Everything
real.
was so real, so vivid. I believe that those women exist.
I believe it. I fully believe it.
You saying you're never taken out of the story, yes. Even when reading The Fraud by Zadie Smith, there are some passages where I really loved them, but I thought, oh, this is how Zadie feels about being a 47-year-old woman.
Yeah,
This
right.
is how Zadie feels about premenopause. This is how Zadie feels about aging.
Mm.
And I loved reading it. But in Charlotte Wood's books, you never have that thought. Everything is so real and vivid. And The Weekend was about 3 or 4 women going to pack up the beach house of their dead friend.
3 women going to pack up the passed away 4th friend.
And they're in their 70s. And I loved that book. I also really loved The Luminous Solution, her book about creativity. And she is an author who I search on podcasts when she has stuff comes out and listen to her interviews. She's such a thoughtful, warm, interesting person. I can't wait to read this book.
I teach from her work all the time.
That actually brings us neatly to one of the stories that a lot of people are talking about, which was in the ABC.
Yep. So Spotify is moving into audiobooks. This is pretty big. It's a pretty big deal. The article talks about how audiobooks in particular are a really fast-growing way that new demographics of people will come to books. So in particular, young people and in particular men. They're not the biggest demographic of audiobook listeners or book readers, but those are demographics that are growing the fastest in terms of who's listening to audiobooks. Apparently 1 in 3 Australians listen to audiobooks now. And what's going to happen is that until now, Audible, who are owned by Amazon, were the only like real place, apart from your public library accounts, to have audiobooks available. Whereas from now on, Spotify are giving premium members 15 hours of audiobooks each month, and they can access 150,000 titles. So it's like a pretty big deal for the book industry, I think.
I think it's a big deal. Do you think it's positive, negative, or a little bit of both?
Okay, so something I wanted to mention was that super cheeky fucked thing that Audible was caught out for doing, and my understanding is that they don't do it anymore, where they would let Audible subscribers have an audiobook in their account for months, even up to a year, and then just return it. And what that meant for the author was that people could listen to your audiobook and you wouldn't get any royalties, whereas it was great for Audible because people would keep paying their monthly subscriptions.
Do you mean that Audible has started giving authors the royalty for that? Or they've stopped
my understanding is that they have significantly updated and restricted their returns policy.
Okay, because their refund policy is still quite generous.
Yeah, but not
not a year.
Months to a year.
Yeah.
And so one of the reason that's relevant to this is because I think one of the reasons Audible sort of got away with that for so long is because there was no healthy competition. And I just think it's a really good thing that a big company that is owned by an even bigger company, that at least another big company is entering the scene.
I agree. I think audiobooks are so fantastic.
Yeah.
For my own reading, but also just obviously for accessibility issues. You know, my aunt's blind, and it's amazing to see the change in the industry from when my first book came out in 2018, and it wasn't an audiobook. And audiobooks were definitely around, but they didn't make everything an audiobook. Mine wasn't made an audiobook, and you could basically get the big titles to now. And what's that, 5 years ago to now, where you can get almost every book published as an audiobook, which I think is so fantastic. And I listen to them all the time, particularly nonfiction. I love reading nonfiction on audio books, walking or doing the chores or whatever. I understand that there are concerns for authors. Basically, we have to figure out how you pay the authors royalties on them and make sure that authors are getting paid a decent amount on it. I think it's super positive for there to be competition against Amazon, which owns Audible. And 15 hours a month is great with Spotify. But in this article on the ABC, it raised this issue, which I did find a little bit concerning, which is that if Spotify stopped at being 15 hours, so you get 15 hours a month of audiobooks, and then from then they want you to pay. Fair enough. As long as in the future they don't make it unlimited hours a month as part of your music subscription, because if they made it unlimited hours a month, essentially books would become part of streaming, and there would just be almost no way for authors to make money from them, which is the same issue that bands, and it has not been resolved at all.
Bands and musicians have been struggling with this since Spotify.
With Spotify for years now, and it's almost like you can't put the genie back in the bottle with it. They haven't been able to figure out a way to get paid. There are musicians who have songs that have 1 million streams, and they essentially get paid $12 for that, or some other crazy tiny number. And so that's the only concern with Spotify. If they keep it capped at 15 hours, that's reasonable. That's great. Authors can still get paid. But if they ever remove that cap and books enter the world of streaming, then essentially we won't be making any money off our audiobooks. And audiobooks are music is so much work to create, obviously. But audiobooks are so much work.
Yeah.
I was so I had to audition for my second book, which was nonfiction.
I had to audition for my memoir.
Yeah, and did you pass your audition?
Barely.
I didn't. They wrote back almost immediately, we'll find someone else. Which I was fine with.
Yeah.
Because everyone I know, you included, but I remember Rick doing his one, especially when you're doing a memoir. My book of essays was, very, very insightful, very clever, very funny.
I found it all three of those things.
But your memoir and Rick's memoir had a lot of traumatic stuff in there. And then you guys had to go into these tiny booths and read it out loud.
Yeah. I remember it was, I will never again. I've recorded the audiobooks for all three of my books so far because they've been first person nonfiction, and
so was my essays.
Yeah,
babe.
but
you just have a nicer voice than me.
No, but it's an excruciating process, and I do not intend to ever do it again.
Remember when Rick was doing, because he did both, and I remember when he was and both dealt with traumatic events in his life, and I remember, and he was a smoker at the time. He's been quit for more than a year now, and I remember him telling me he was in this dark room, leaving every 30 minutes or so, or maybe even maybe every hour to smoke ciggies and coming back. And I thought, God, imagine how that much must have felt to be in this enclosed dark space, stinking of ciggies and tasting ciggies and then craving ciggies and then coming back in to read these traumatic things in your life and then being stopped at certain points. They portray this very well in season 2 of And Just Like That. When Carrie Bradshaw has to do the audiobook of her memoir about her husband dying. I joke, but it actually is well portrayed about how, like, they stop you at certain points and say, redo that sentence, redo that word. And also, it must be unique agony reading it out loud and thinking, oh, I would have phrased, like, can I change that?
Oh, yeah.
Can I phrase? And you're not allowed to.
That's one of the most excruciating things.
You're not allowed to change it.
You see everything you wish you'd done differently. Yeah, and it's too late.
Which every writer would do on every rereading of anything.
Yeah, especially because often when you're recording an audiobook, in terms of the timeline, it's occurring when you have completely finished it, it's been published, you can't change anything, and it's the first time that you've had a few months break from it since all of the like really close reading and like forensic level editing. And so you've got fresh eyes. You come back to it for the first time in ages having had a break and you see all of your regrets. The final thing I want to mention on this, though, is a little plug. We are almost we've raised $45,000 out of $55,000 for the Freedom Inside crowdfund to get women with lived experience of incarceration to go back into prisons in New South Wales and run book clubs for women still stuck inside. This is this advocacy initiative that I co-founded with an incredible organization called the Women's Justice Network. And the reason it's relevant is because something that we will be pushing for is getting access to audiobooks for women who are in prison.
That would be so transformative.
Which would be fully transformative, because something that we're very aware of is the differing levels of literacy, both for English-only speakers and also for people who speak fantastically in other languages and just can't necessarily read and write in English. And if you've not yet heard me rave about this thing, Freedom Inside, FREAD, it's a clever pun. Please go and look. We are at the final leg of fundraising, and I think we can get it done before the end of the year.
We'll put those links definitely in our show notes, and we'll also post them on Instagram as well.
Yes,
for
please.
People to go to and donate. Such a great cause.
The other big story of the week I really want to talk to you about is two in particular of the winners of this year's Nobel Prize. I want to talk about the economics winner, and then I think we should talk about the literature winner.
I have much more to say on the literature winner.
Oh, good. Well, I have more to say on the economics winner. Okay, I'm going to dive into her because I think she's a fucking legend. So the Nobel for Economics this year went to Claudia Golden. Huge milestone is that she's the first ever winner, the first ever woman to win solo the Nobel for Economics. There have been 2 women who've won in the past, but both of them were co-winners with men. And this is something that is noticeable across several Nobel categories, is how difficult it is for women to get solo wins, which is just so telling, right? Anyway, so they awarded it to Claudia Golden for having advanced our understanding of women's labor market outcomes. And I went and read a little bit about her and her work, and something that she sort of words that she uses to describe her own work and how her work is understood by others, are that she takes this sort of historical and quite investigative approach to economics. And something that her work has revealed, for example, is that in terms of the current sort of status of the gender pay gap, it has been a long time since it was actually about women choosing different types of professions. What Claudia Golden's work has demonstrated is that the huge challenge that we've not yet been able to overcome is the pay gap that emerges immediately after people have children. That is the sort of biggest enduring source of the gender pay gap today. And then she talks about how interconnected this is with something you and I have talked about before, which is excessive employer expectations, and this idea that of presenteeism, and how we live in this world now where you're expected to go above and beyond and work these intense hours and be very present at work, and that basically any workplace that does that automatically fucks women more than men once people become parents. She's got this book. It's called Career and Family. I think she's amazing. And it just brings me back to this argument I'm constantly talking about, which is that we will never achieve equality until an employer is as afraid and resentful of a man becoming a father as they are currently afraid and resentful of a woman becoming a mother. And the only way you get that is by universal, free, from birth, early childhood education and care.
Yes. Well, that is an important element in getting it. I agree. But I also think that workplaces need to transform the way they think about how senior positions can be done. And there is still very much a mindset at almost all organizations, I would say, not really at my workplace, but my workplace is particularly my other workplace. I have like 3 different jobs, but is particularly progressive. But this idea that you can't have a senior position if you don't work 5 days a week, which is extremely difficult for everyone in the household, both parents and the children when they're very young, if you have both parents working 5 days a week. And we need to get to a point where it's recognized that you can have someone in a very senior position working 4 days a week, or even job sharing.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And them still be great at their job, essential to the company, and doing great, meaningful, necessary work. And I think that that is very much a mindset that needs to change as well.
What do you think underpins that? I'm really curious. This like outdated idea of like leadership being this kind of pyramid with a single human, particularly a man at the top. Like what is that about the suspicion towards job sharing in higher roles?
I think it's probably very rooted in sexism. But also where the culture is only really just coming out of like this neoliberal aspiration that we've all been marinating in since the 1980s, where the harder you work, the more it says about your character. And I think that people who job share or work less than 5 days a week are seen just not to be working as hard. And if you're not working as hard, you can't be that good at your job. And if you're not working as hard, you certainly can't be in a leadership position, and it's extremely frustrating. And the other frustrating thing is that people who work, I know so many, particularly at my age, in my mid-30s, I know so many women who are working 3 or 4 days a week. They're getting paid for 3 or 4 days a week.
Bingo.
They're absolutely not working 3 or 4 days a week. Yep. You still, if you want to perform well at work and be respected, there is absolutely this expectation of making up a lot of work or doing extra work in the hours that you're not working, which is another frustrating thing.
Yeah, completely. You had opinions or things you wanted to share about the literature winner for the Nobel?
I found him so interesting. Did you read much about him?
No, I tuned out in absolute fury when I found out the fucking annual stipend he gets from the government.
Yeah, okay, so please talk about that because it was one of the interesting things that I thought. So his name is John Fosse?
Fosse, Fosse.
Yeah, John Fosse. John Fosse, he is Norwegian, and I respect this part. He writes in a native language of Norway that only about like 13% of people there speak. And he's been translated obviously into a lot of languages, and one of the books he wrote is 7 volumes long, and it's all one sentence. I hate those kind of books, to be honest.
Also, we should say he's most known for and prolific as a playwright.
Yes.
He writes novels and other things as well, but playwriting is his kind of number one.
And he's in his 70s, lives in Norway. Yes, talk about the stipend he gets. He gets paid by the Norwegian government to live in a mansion and write these plays. And what's the stipend?
Okay, so I tried to sleuth this out and could only find the kind of krona equivalent from websites that I don't know. I don't know this for sure. It wasn't a government website, but when I looked it up, the equivalent was well over 500,000 Australian dollars a year.
So I had difficulty finding the exact number as well, because I think some of it is made up of his free huge house that he gets from the Norwegian government. I respect it. I think we should get free huge houses. Actually,
you think someone whose work services like 15% of the population at best should get
He's getting translated. No, I actually don't really think that any artist should be given that much by the government, because I think that you need to live in the real world to create good.
Also, like, you can't give someone that's tax.
Yeah,
that's money that is taxed from people. Like, oh my God.
And this guy in his 70s gets all this money. Now he's won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which is about $1 million. I looked this up because I was interested in some of the stats around it after reading some criticism, which I'm about to get to. In the last 13 years, 5 white men have won, which I didn't think was too bad. One of them was Bob Dylan. Can't wait for our Nobel laureate Taylor Swift. Yeah, that's definitely coming. And the criticism, he got actually a lot of criticism for this from...
Dylan did or Foss did?
Foss did from... No, everyone loved it when Dylan got it. Everyone loves Dylan.
The fuck?
He got a lot of criticism from Arabic writers in particular, which was interesting. And this Iraqi novelist, Azir Jirjiz, he lives in exile in Norway, and he called Fosse a writer of, inverted commas, domestic literature who, and this is a direct quote, has no position on wars, global violence, or the oppression of peoples, and stuffs his ears with dough against the screams of the oppressed. Oh. Now, I love that as some bitching from the sidelines from someone who didn't win.
Yeah, that is some like lit crit gossip level.
Yeah,
like shit throwing.
You know, in 2023, after everything the world has experienced since basically 2016, you know, we are living in very tumultuous times.
Fucking
and
earth.
so I think that there is an element to this that I can see where he's coming from, and there is an element of this that I agree with, where it must be very nice to not have to be political.
Mm.
And you're a person of certain privilege. You don't have to be political. What is the point of art? Is art there to serve us during these difficult times and to take a stance and to try to change society? I can see where he's coming from with that. On the flip side, I am someone who values the domestic life so much and how people live so much. And I do find it so interesting, and I do find it the very foundation of life and the meaning of life and why we're here is how people live in the domestic sphere. And I am interested in that. And even people who are living, like, which we see again and again in art and again and again in people's stories, even people who are living in the most grim circumstances still have aspects of ordinary domestic life and are still human beings who are going through each day dealing with their relationships with other people. Actually thinking a bit of Shader in that, the movie Shader, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago, which dealt with that very well. So
the thing that sets off alarm bells here for me, though, is that there is a way in which a man will be rewarded for insight into the quote-unquote domestic, and when a woman does it, it's not taken seriously.
It's chicklit.
Yeah, it's chicklit.
You get a pink cover.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't get a pink cover.
No,
my cover.
There is no pink on your cover. And the Lebanese critic and poet Nabil Mamlouk said Fosse's win, direct quote, opens the door to one problematic question. How is the winner chosen? Are the world's readers implicitly consulted? To what extent do the award criteria represent the taste and art of reading? Which I think is such a good question. Like I don't think we want to award the Nobel Prize of Literature to like Colleen Hoover.
I'm going to look
because she's got enough money to keep her warm at night. She's like a romance writer topping all the charts. But I did think that was an interesting issue to raise. Like, you're getting $1 million and praised as like one of the pinnacles of literature in English speaking world. Does it matter if you're read or not, and who does get to be the arbiter of taste on that?
So here, I've just found on, and this is from nobelprize.org, so legit. What criteria do you use to choose Nobel Prize laureates? It's all about quality, literary quality, of course. The winner needs to be someone who writes excellent literature, someone who you feel when you read that there's some kind of a power, a development that lasts through books, all of their books. But the world is full of very good, excellent writers, and you need something more to be a laureate. It's very difficult to explain what that is. Motherfucker, try. It's
But also,
something.
who gets to decide this?
Yeah,
like,
that's
who
what I
is
mean.
deciding what's excellent?
It's something you're born with. I'm still quoting directly here. It's something you're born with, I think. The romantics would call it a divine spark. Jesus. For me.
Who is? Oh my-
yeah, sorry, I'm going to find that
Who's
in a moment.
deciding the divine spark?
Blah, blah, blah,
A lot
blah,
of men,
blah.
I bet.
It's something you're born with. Get fucked. A talent that gives that extra dimension to that particular writer's work. Okay, so this is from the Nobel website. We spoke to Ellen Mattsson, Mattsson, who helps to decide the Nobel Prize in Literature. She's a writer, a novelist, a member of the Swedish Academy, and also of the Nobel Committee.
Yeah, so it's very opaque.
Opaque. Opaque. Oh my God, that's a good one.
It is very opaque how they decide. And did you know that they don't release a short list until 50 years after the prize? And a final thing that I thought was interesting in the awarding of, I don't actually have a very strong opinion of him winning this because I haven't read any of his work.
No, me either, which is why I would never pass judgment.
Yeah, so I'm not passing judgment. I just thought that the conversations around it were really interesting. And the final thing I was going to say about this was that other critics detected a bias toward European and Scandinavian culture and towards men. He is the 17th writer of Scandinavian origin to win the prize out of 120 laureates.
Well, maybe you're just fucking born with it.
Yeah, maybe the Scandinavians are just born with that divine spark.
Fucking
like
talent.
there's obvious bias there, isn't there? And then also, guess how many? So 17 writers of Scandinavian origin in the whole history of 120-year history of the prize. Guess how many women?
How many?
17. So just as many Scandinavians as women have been thought to have the divine spark.
Oh my God, if there was something I could fucking set fire to on a pyre, it would be the divine spark. Jesus.
But also
that makes
all
me
awards
so-
are bullshit. So
Yes,
this is just a
all
really fun
awards are bullshit.
conversation.
Yeah. We'll go in. Well, let's do a deep dive on awards at some time. They're all bullshit. What have you got coming up this week?
My brother is visiting.
No, wrong answer, Bridie. We're having a party.
Yes, we're having a party to celebrate the launch of this podcast.
I'm excited.
And all of our listeners. I'm so excited for us. You're making me wear a cocktail dress.
I'm making everybody get dressed because we are the occasion. And I say we, I mean everyone who will be in my home, not we as in Bridie and I. Although technically it's our launch party, so we are the occasion.
And well, can't wait to tell you guys, listeners, all about it when we come back. And I'm sure there'll be lots of photos online as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review. We love reading them, especially the glowing ones. You can also find us on Instagram at CoolStoryBrieBridie, and every episode is on YouTube, so you can watch Brie's reactions as they happen. This episode was produced by Sam Devonport and it was recorded on Gadigal land.
Want to hear a cool story? Get it wherever you get your podcasts.